Hey Toy Family, welcome to the Marsham Toy Hour, where we discuss anything and everything designer toys. I'm Gary Ham.
I'm Teresa Hawkins.
I'm George Gaspar.
And we did it. 2 episodes into season 5. I didn't think we'd be recording this
Yeah.
soon. I thought we'd be doing every other week.
I'm saying 2 weeks in a row. Look at us go.
Look at that.
I'm proud of us.
Who would have thought? We were going to take a little more casual, laid-back approach to this season. Hey, if we don't have enough stuff to talk about that week, we'll just skip it, go on to the next one. But actually, right before last week's record, we discovered there's a new show streaming on Amazon Prime called Mastercasters. It's about the resin bootleg scene. It's a documentary about it. And we just didn't have enough time to watch it before last week's record. So we figured, hey, let's just save it for next week. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk a little Mastercasters today.
It makes sense.
And rather than us just talking on what we saw, I thought we would bring on a guest who has a little more insight into the documentary. So joining us today is the producer and director of Mastercasters, Timothy Patrick. Thanks for joining, Timothy.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be on your podcast. I've heard about you for so many years. I've talked to George a few times, but glad to be here. And Teresa, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So Timothy, as I mentioned in the intro, the designer toy scene is very excited about this documentary that you put together, Mastercasters, and it's been getting lots of shares. It seems like every time I go on social media, I'm seeing someone mention it, and it's getting a really great feedback. That must be awesome for you to see.
Yeah, it's actually surprising. I've been working on this thing for a while, and the audience has been growing while I've been working on it, but the reaction to just having it up on Amazon has been great, and a lot of positive feedback, and I couldn't ask for anything more.
So how long ago did you actually start filming of this? Because George looks much younger.
Yeah, I'd say George looks healthier now.
Yeah,
to be honest,
he's got his act together now.
Yeah. But I figured you guys would be curious about that. When I filmed George, that was in 2016.
Okay.
And that was maybe my third interview. My first interview was in the end of 2015. So it's been a journey.
Yeah, years in the making.
Yeah, years in the making. And that's for many reasons. One of them is I'm like Dick Van Dyke in Mary Poppins. I'm like a one-man band on this project. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
So
you're Trent Reznor.
Yeah, exactly. So it took time. And, I actually started it as a side project figuring, this will just be something to distract me from my other short film. But it proved to be a long journey. I actually finished it in, my final interview was in 2018. So the film was done early 2019.
Okay.
And I took that year to submit to film festivals and played a few toy festivals. And then the start of the new year, I threw it up on Amazon.
Okay, now you make it seem like throwing it up on Amazon is some easy thing. That's not really the case, right? Is that something to where maybe Amazon saw it at one of the events and reached out to you to help distribute it? Or is it something that you go to them and ask for their help in getting it up on their service?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's easy. You got to know what you're doing. I'm lucky enough. I consider myself an indie filmmaker, and I even have a podcast. I'll do a shameless plug. It's called Indie Film Grit, and I invite indie filmmakers and all types of people on. And one of my episodes, I talked to a distributor, and we hooked up, and it's available to all indie filmmakers. You just got to do it right, and then they get it up there.
Nice.
And, yeah. And it's interesting because it's funny. I've been thinking about this in sort of a philosophical way, not to go off on a tangent, but the reaction I've been getting from people that it's on Amazon, it definitely gives it some credibility,
Yeah.
In reality, whether you're watching a video on YouTube or Amazon, it's the same thing, But it's been really exciting to get it up there because people are watching their shows on Prime Video, and then, they can watch my documentary. So it's cool.
Yeah, I think it's just the mysteriousness of it all. Like what Gary said, it sounds like it's some fancy thing. Like Amazon reached out and said, "Yes, we want your film up." So it just feels special.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
I'm
that's great. We'll
curious.
take it.
Yeah. No, I mean it's cool. I'm curious. So what like I don't know you. This is my first time meeting you. So have you been a part of the scene and know the scene and that's what and like you're a bootleg collector and that's what made you want to make the film, or like how I don't know your connection to the scene and what brought you into making this documentary.
Right. Well, that's a great question. And yeah, it's not like somebody was like, oh, hey, why don't you make a movie about us? It didn't happen that way. Basically, I've always been a fan of toys since I was a kid. Right when you get too old for toys and, you're supposed to be thinking about girls and stuff, I kept buying toys. I kept buying them, but in my mind, they were investments. So I never really stopped caring about toys, and my heart is in the 80s for various reasons. So a few years ago, maybe 2013, I started going deep on Instagram, and I started seeing all these homemade action figures, and I was just amazed that these people are doing what I love. And I've made customs myself over the years, never even thinking, oh, that's a scene I want to get into or anything like that. But I was fascinated by these guys, and looking at Instagram, I was just like, wow, how do they do it? How does it work? Who are the main guys? Who does this? Just like a lot of people who discover it. So I tried to learn as much as I could. I ended up going to my first decon in 2014, and I was like, wow, this is real. I guess I was late to the game, but and that in turn, just like a lot of other people that go to decon, I was inspired to make my own toys, like legit.
Yep.
So for about, I don't know, 6 to 8 months, I was pouring resin, cracking molds, making He-Man mashups, all types of stuff just for myself. But then at one point I realized, why am I doing this? Like, do I really want to hawk my wares like these guys? It's not easy. And I see what people do, and I really respect it. So I was like, what if I stop making toys and I just make a movie about the guys already making toys?
Uh-huh.
And, once I met the Sucklord, I was like, there's the keystone. That's the character that's going to get me through the story. And that was it. I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any friends in the scene. I followed a few on Instagram, but a years long journey of getting to know these guys, getting to understand why they do what they do, their own particular styles and personalities. And nobody knows me from Adam, so in the beginning it was extremely difficult. They'd be like, oh yeah, I've been interviewed for 3 docs, nobody finished it. It's like that sort of thing. So I got a few, I think ETC toys, Extra Terrestrial was my first. I really liked what he was doing, and I was going to be in his area. And after that, I secured the Sucklord, because I figured if I get the Sucklord, everybody else will join in.
Yeah, because like you said, he's the key to this whole thing.
So yeah, that one day I flew to New York for 2 days by myself with like 4 bags of gear, went to his place, interviewed him, went to my hotel, went to sleep, then went to Healy Maid's place, interviewed him, and then got out of New York. So it's been a really bare bones passion project. To even call it micro budget is a little, excessive, because I was just paying as I could, as I went, So that's part of the reason why it took so long. But the other reason is I had to gain the trust of these people, And you could ask for an interview and not hear back from somebody for 6 months.
Oh, I know. I've sent out many invites just for the podcast. It's not easy getting guests.
No, it's not.
We know that very well.
Yeah, and you also know the scene, right? These aren't the most approachable people, some of them. So not in a bad way.
No, not in a bad way, but I think I know what you mean. We've reached out to several people to come on the show, and for the most part, most people respond. But we've learned that a lot of people are just shy. A lot of creatives are just introverted. They feel more comfortable talking to you via DM or email. They're not necessarily interested in talking in a real-time format, especially one that's recording them or, showing their face on something. So I get that.
Yeah, and I respect that. I mean, they're expressing themselves through their art. That's why they do it. They're not accustomed to being articulate. Some were more articulate than others, the Sucklord being one of them. And so I knew, and basically I didn't even have a story. I just, for my own selfish reasons, I want to figure out the entire scene, figure out who were the players, what it took to do it, what it took them to get up there, how long it took them to do that, the whole process. And so I was really interested, and that's why I embarked on it, and that's why I worked on it for so long. And now I feel like it's in no way a definitive history or look at the bootleg world, but it's such a hard scene to define that I feel like there's now a basis of a story there. People can look at it and say, oh, that's how it falls into place. Because you'd be surprised, even interviewing artists, they don't know the history or who's doing what. Everybody's in their own little bubble. So I really wanted to put together sort of a comprehensive, story.
That was going to actually be my main question for you is, did you have a narrative that you wanted to tell before you went in? But it sounds like you didn't. Because the movie itself has a pretty nice narrative flow throughout the whole thing. Like, as people talk about what they're doing and they mention someone else, you kind of jump to the next guy and the next guy. Like, it actually flows really, really nicely throughout the 20-something minute runtime. It flows well throughout the whole thing as everyone talks about what they're doing, who did this first, who's the next guy that inspired them, or who do they think they inspired, and it kind of jumps from name to name, and it flows really nicely. To hear you didn't have, because I would almost think you would have to ask the right questions to get the people to talk about the right thing. But to hear that everyone just kind of talked randomly without knowing what the other one was saying and you figured it out, that's pretty impressive.
Thank you. That was important to me. I mean, as I went on, I started to discover certain threads that I found fascinating. And even before my first interview, I had the idea that I wanted to explore 2 veterans in the scene and 2 newbies, right? So that was my basic thing. And also I wanted to explore this sort of, abstract idea of defining what they're doing, because as you have all seen the movie, and I get into in the second bit, or the final bit, about the difference between a bootleg and an indie toy, or an indie toy and an art toy, or a designer toy and an indie toy. There's so many words out there, and George, you have a great line in there. You say, once you start asking for definitions, it doesn't work. So,
yep.
so I did have a vague idea of what I wanted to do, but the truth of the matter is I had to find those threads. And, even making the film, even shooting the film, people would ask, oh, so what are you going to do? You're going to throw up a card that says Healy made, and then go into Healy made, or throw up a card that says, what is a bootleg toy? And then go into that. This is my second documentary, and in the first one, I was able to do the same style, which is I want it to be one complete sentence, one complete song. I want it to flow from this topic to the other without forcing the subject change, whether that be title cards or whatever. So I appreciate that you picked up on that, George. To me, that's one of my finest accomplishments on this, is the way the threads work throughout the film in a conversational way.
Yeah, it totally feels like you're watching a conversation. There's no, like you said, it doesn't have that harsh jump to like new topic over here. Look over here. No, it works. It works really well.
Well, thank you, George.
Yeah, I totally enjoyed it, and one of the nicest things about it is that it was on Amazon Prime. You mentioned there's not much difference between something being on there and YouTube, and I don't think that's true. With it being on Amazon Prime, it does give it that legitimacy, but there's also people that go there and just look for documentaries, and they might watch this not having any idea about the designer toy scene or anything. Plus, there's other people like let's say Teresa or myself, or really anybody in the designer toy scene, they kind of only know the artists that they follow or the things that they collect. Cute collectors probably aren't going to know a whole lot about the designer toys bootleg scene, if anything at all. We had several people that were on your documentary on this podcast, Sucklord, Killer Bootlegs, Dove Kellemer of DKE Toys, but that was all before Teresa. So Teresa, from your perspective, how was it watching this documentary? Was it enlightening for you?
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on, Gary. I wasn't doing the podcast when those guests came on, and I know we've talked about bringing someone else on while with me being a host now, but yeah, like it's not an area of the scene I understand, or truthfully, I've really gotten. I know it exists, but I've always kind of been like, I don't get that. I don't get why it exists. It's just a confusing area for me. It's a big question mark. And I look at it and I'm like, it's kind of the same when I look at like the gross, gory side of the scene, right? Where I used to be like, I don't get it. And I've been learning more and kind of understanding and unearthing details about what exactly that is and why it exists. And so you all were talking about master casters and I was like, all right, like I'll watch this. And the whole time I'm like sitting there and I'm like, I've never heard that artist other than Sucklord. But I'm like, I don't know who that artist is. And I'm like sitting and looking them up. And I'm like, I've never heard that artist, sitting and looking them up. And it was so intriguing just to get just a better understanding of that side of the scene. Because in my head, when I hear bootleg, I have a certain definition. And I think after watching Master Casters, that definition has sort of grayed, because to me, bootleg is a straight up copy. Like someone steals your toy and goes and tries to make it and sell it as that thing. That's in my head typically what a bootleg is. But this bootleg side of the scene with action figures is different. And it was also intriguing to me how vast the approach can be, that everyone kind of has their different way of dealing in the scene, in the bootleg scene, as far as how they design and what they do and where they feel like they fit. And I just didn't even know about any of that. I just thought, okay, there's just people like like you said, George, taking the head of one and slapping it on a body and calling it a day. And I didn't even realize that it was so mismatched. And as well, like I didn't realize they were also casting as much as they did. So I found it very interesting. For someone as me, I would call myself a bootleg noob. It kind of made me understand that side of the scene a lot better.
Well, that's great. I mean, that's kind of what I was going for. I'm not just making this movie for the artist or their fans. I tried to make it a comprehensive introduction to the subculture. And, you know, I totally get it. Everybody has the things that they like. I was never into Dunnies or urban vinyl or that sort of thing. I understand people are, and that's great. But once I saw the bootleg scene, I instantly understood it. I was like, I mean, not the intricacies, but the art, the passion, the nostalgia, all that. It fit right into my wheelhouse. So, and I knew it hadn't been explored, you know. So most of the stuff I saw on YouTube was, you know, sort of the other end of the designer toy world.
Yeah, and that's like, we all have our own pockets, but the more you learn, you realize it's such a vast spectrum. But what was also intriguing to me is the bootleg scene is almost a scene in our wider scene, and I did not at all realize how many artists there are. In my head, I knew about a couple, but it's like there's tons. Like it almost, I don't know, Gary, George, again, I'm still kind of a noob, but when I started looking and seeing the list of people, it almost felt like much, much larger than I had in my head. People doing that stuff.
In the documentary, that, you know, you talk to a handful of people, but then you flash that one screen where there's all the names you pop up, and it's like, I'm sure that's just the tip of the iceberg. It is amazing how many people are doing this kind of thing.
And every day there's more.
And no one uses their real name.
Maybe just Healy, because that's his actual name, right?
Yeah, this is his last name, so I guess Healy's the closest that I can think of.
But it's a branding thing, you know. It's it's instead of Kenner, what are you going to put on the card art, you know? And I don't think it's limited just to the resin bootleg scene. As you guys know more about the other scenes, I'm sure. But you think about like Buff Monster, or there's other names out there and different, and I think a lot of it stems from kind of the street art vibe, the hint that this may be illegal. I'm not going to show my face or say my name, and I think as the scene has grown, less and less people are worried about that. But I'm not going to mention who, but one of the people I interviewed would only do it if I signed a contract saying that I would blur his face out.
Oh, wow.
So there is that kind of illegal street art mentality. By the end of it, he and I have become great friends, and fortunately didn't have to do it. But yeah, I think there is a little bit of hiding in the shadows with these guys.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. I think the other thing is it seems like there's this sort of rivalry aspect. And I don't know, I just wonder if that's part of the secrecy and mystery too, that people are kind of, I don't know, seems kind of competitive in the bootleg side of like trying to claim an idea. And I guess by being under a moniker, you're less likely to get, I don't know, beat up on.
But that was what was interesting about, especially towards the end of the documentary, is they have Sucklord mentioning that most of the designer toy scene seems to play nice, except for the bootleg side. He mentioned there's wars going on and beefs and rivalries and broken alliances, and it sounds like there's a lot of drama on that side of the scene. It's not something that I've ever followed closely enough to even know that stuff was going on, but I mean, it doesn't surprise me at all. So it was interesting how you chose to end it, Timothy, because it kind of ended on a note of kind of exposing that side of the scene for that sort of stuff. And Healy Maid was saying, but why does this exist? Because at the end of the day, we're all bootleggers borrowing from someone else's IP.
Well, it's ironic, isn't it? I mean, the fact that they're claiming what they created is theirs, even though they stole it from somebody else. It's funny to me. And in the case of the movie, I think it also kind of gives insight to the mentality of a lot of these guys, and also it was a little bit of drama I could have in the film, so it makes things more exciting if the stakes are higher.
You definitely found a good hook. Yeah.
Well, that's always been a part, I think, of the scene in general, right? Of that sort of gray line of ownership of ideas versus kind of springboarding off, right? Inspired by versus copying. That's not just the bootleg scene. That's everywhere. We constantly talk about that, about where is that line, as no one can sit and take claim to certain concepts, but when does being inspired by become copying? And I think it's the same. In a way, it sounds like the bootleggers have a similar mindset, even though they're bootlegging, meaning using parts someone else designed, and they're still doing art, they're still compiling things and creating ideas, and they don't want anyone else, crossing the line and taking that same concept.
It is funny how they there's this whole mentality in that scene of that you got to be the first guy to put that thing out, like at Art Basel last year when that banana sold it on the banana that was taped to a wall sold within 2 minutes. There's a guy on Instagram posting his bootleg banana, and then it was 15 other guys were the next day they're like, damn it, my bootleg banana's not ready yet. Everybody wants to be that first guy to get that bootleg banana up there, and it's kind of that whole thing in the scene where we all grew up on the same movies and we all love the same things. There's only so many stormtroopers you could use, it's weird. So now everybody's trying to go for the way more obscure thing and the way more, do you remember this at all? Just trying to be very first, as soon as it's on the air that night, they're working on it. They found this thing is, you got to get on it hot.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I imagine it's stressful for a lot of the bootleggers. I just saw that amazing SNL skit. That's going to be an amazing figure, but I gotta get it out the next day, because if you wait 3 days, like you just said, someone else is going to beat you to the punch.
And not only that,
David S. Pumpkins. I'm sad about that.
That's true. I would love that.
What I was going to say, not only that, are people racing to get it out, whether it's Baby Yoda or the Starbucks cup in Game of Thrones. People get upset if someone drops a picture of theoretical card art for the project without even casting it yet. There's different layers to, oh, that's the easy way out. You didn't even do it, but you're going to grab all the money. So, no, most of these guys, it's their passion.
About that.
It's their art, and they want to be known, and they want their stuff to be sold, and they want a seat at the table. So, I don't blame them. It would just stress me out.
Would any of this have happened without Sucklord? I mean, he's obviously the pioneer. As far as anyone knows, he is the first one to do this as an art form.
Yeah.
Had he not done this, I mean, it sounds like, Killer Bootlegs and other people were doing this not knowing about Sucklord, but do you think it would have been as big? Has Sucklord not been technically the first?
Yeah, I think if it wasn't Sucklord, it would have been somebody. But the fact that Sucklord is who he is also lends itself to that me against the world thing. It's like, I'm the guy, you're going to like it, or, screw you. So not only was he important in launching the scene, but I think he's important for establishing the sort of indie bootlegger trope of the artist.
Yeah.
And I love his honesty with it, too.
Oh, he's so honest. But I think that's what makes him attractive, I guess. Like, attractive maybe is not the right word, but like, as an artist, for him to just be like, yeah, like, it may not be the best quality. I don't give a shit. Like, this is just me. It's what I'm making.
Yeah.
And so I think that honesty makes people like respect him as an artist and be like, this guy knows what he is and what he's doing, and he owns it.
Right. And it's great. And, I pull, when I was making this film, I saw a lot of parallels between what he and other bootleg makers are doing and what I was trying to do with my film. I didn't have money. I was throwing it together by myself, but I wanted to take parts from here and here and here and bring it together and make it into something new that I was proud of, that would, maybe inspire people, maybe inform people. So I'm even happy. I almost take the Sucklord mentality on this film because, as you guys know, you've seen it, some of the footage isn't the best. And I literally could justify every shot in that film from an artistic standpoint if I needed to, based on the bootleg mentality. So I think it all works for me and the project. And you got to respect Sucklord for doing that. His personality can be a little off-putting, but he's really intelligent. He's articulate, and he's charming in his own way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
What was the topic of the other documentary you made?
Well, I used to work at the Roxy Theater on the Sunset Strip. I was kind of the in-house video guy, shooting bands and whatnot. And my buddy was a booker there. And I decided to make a doc about him. And it's called The Booker. We shot it all black and white, kind of noir style, because he kind of dresses like a old school New York guy in like the Dick Tracy days. But
yeah, like halfway through, he died. My friend died.
Oh my gosh.
So that film is also very personal, but in a very different way, because I had to switch gears, use the footage I already had, and it became more of a memorial to my friend than what we had intended originally. But that actually won a Best Documentary Short at a LA Indie Film Festival. But once again, that was thrown together. I'm an indie filmmaker, just like these indie bootleg toy makers. So I'm just doing my art, and if it gets better each time, I'm happy. And that's kind of the direction I'm headed in,
Well, I can certainly say that Mastercasters has made a lot of people in our scene happy, and we thank you very much for that. And I've read a lot of comments of people saying it's just too short. You left a lot of people wanting more. Is this a one and done for you, or do you see yourself doing more films in this area?
No, I think this entire scene, even broader than the bootleg toy scene, has yet to really see the light of day. It's still kind of in the shadows, and people can argue with me, but the fact of the matter is, I think it lends itself to all types of things. Like, I mean, if I had the money, if someone paid me to do this, it would have been a feature film, you know? I just can't spend 20 years of my life, you know, every 2 months a new bootleg resin artist comes out and he says, you got to put me in. So I had to snap it off at one point. But one of the things I like about my documentary too, it's not just I go to their booth, shoot them, and that's their segment. A lot of these guys, you see them through the years in that short 24 minutes. You can tell their hair's different location. So I wanted to give it kind of a lived-in type thing, not to sound like George Lucas, but, you know, like there's more than just here's their case in their booth and here's their headshot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that also took time.
Yeah, and I like that it's not just here's how to make bootleg toys things. Like there's so many places you can go to look up like how to make molds and casting. Like you don't focus on that. It's a real story about people. It's cool.
Yeah.
You definitely wanted me, left me wanting more. I wanted, now that I know that there was rifts and rivalries, I'm trying to figure out, was there anybody in the documentary that didn't get along? It didn't show in the documentary, but I have to imagine maybe it was there.
Yeah. There was a snippet. Didn't you feel it with the whole Suckler killer bootlegs?
Yeah, a little bit, certainly, but you only got a hint of it. Like, for Suckler to mention the entire scene as kind of at war with each other, you kind of wanted to see a little more of that, a little more knowledge of what was really going on. But yeah, you get a sense that there was something. There was also something interesting where Dallas Slice Bootlegs was mentioning, oh, he's a Wave 3 guy. So if a person was to come in now, what wave does that put them at?
They'd probably be at least Wave 5 or 6 at this point. I mean, I was in Brooklyn. That's where we premiered the film at 5 Points. There's guys there in high school doing it. So it just keeps growing. And, somebody on Instagram took a picture of their son, I guess, holding up his first bootleg toy that he cast. And he did it right after he watched Mastercasters.
That's crazy.
So it's never ending. It's just going to keep going and going and going. And that's why part of me was like, I got to get on this and solidify the foundation, at least in my head. I'm crazy like that. If I'm really interested into something, I want to figure it all out. You know what I mean? Or at least get close. Obviously, there's a few artists that were along the way that I just didn't have access to. Some are in Europe, some are, all over the world at this point. And, some of the guys were a little butthurt that they weren't in there in the doc. I think me putting all the logos I could was kind of a shout out to all the guys I didn't get to and all the up and coming guys. And, it played at a toy show in Canada, and a lot of those guys didn't even expect it, but they saw their logo. And I think it's good to celebrate everybody in the scene,
I thought, yeah, you did a great job. And we're always advocates for any way to get the knowledge out there that the scene exists. It's just, it doesn't grow nearly as fast as everyone wants. We're still, like you said, we're still kind of in the shadows a little bit. So thank you so much for doing this and opening a lot of people's eyes to the world of designer toys and resin bootlegs.
Well, hey, man, thank you.
Well, Timothy, thanks so much for joining and talking about it. I think anyone who hasn't already streamed it on Amazon, definitely do that after you listen to finish this podcast. It's called Mastercasters, and it's streaming right now on Amazon Prime.
Thank you, Gary. Had a lot of fun. I'll just say, can I give him my Instagram as well, at Mastercasters_, because that seems to be where the action's at. But thank you, Gary, and thank you, George, and thank you, Teresa.
Yeah, I'm glad I ran into you. I'm glad I ran into you the other day, and I also, anyone who's interested in indie film in general should definitely go check out his podcast. It's Indie Film Grit. Just look it up on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thanks for the plug, George.
Of course.
Love you guys. Take care.
All right, take care.
All right, thanks for joining. Bye-bye. Well, that was nice having Timothy join us and giving us a nice peek into like all the years and all the effort that went into it, and him not having a roadmap as to how the documentary was done. That was cool.
Yeah, that was interesting. Nice little peek behind the curtain.
Yeah, it's been fun diving in more into the resin bootleg side of the scene a little bit more this week, and I found it interesting to find out that pressure of being the first to market on something, that first idea of something, that claim to that thing. But also I find it kind of interesting is how many people go to the conventions and learn about this sort of thing themselves, and they're like, oh, I can be a maker too. I have an idea for a great mashup, and they go home and they learn how to do it themselves. But with that said, I also wonder how many people within that resin bootleg scene are kind of one and dones, because not all of them are necessarily creative types or artists or creators. They might have that one great idea, but do they have that longevity of a Healy or a Sucklord or a Killer Bootlegs? They can't all be. So I imagine many of them are kind of one-hit wonders. They get in and they get out.
I bet you there are, and I don't think that if you ask Sucklord, I don't think he would even say all of his are hits. I'm sure that some of them are just ones that he liked or he liked the idea and didn't sell. Just a bummer thing that no one connected to. But I'm sure that there's probably people who have done that, who someone has a great idea first and they get it out there and then that was it. They just don't, either they realize how hard it is to do all that work, or they just don't have another idea that's as good as that one.
Yeah, well, even in the doc, I mean, it seems clear that there are, sometimes they hit a gem, right? Whether it's good timing or the perfect parody or mashup, or just something like a SNL skit that blew up, like a Baby Yoda type of thing, right? Where it's all over the internet, and they just kind of struck gold. And I feel like there are certain figures that sort of reach that peak. I mean, wasn't the doc talking about like someone's piece on eBay selling for like $1,300 or something?
Yeah, or I think that might have been the other. There's another another peek at indie stuff on YouTube by someone else, and I think that was in that one, if I'm not mistaken. Before we get into that one, and actually kind of leads into that one as well. But the thing that I really got out of that Masters Casters was the look at the kind of two different. There's almost like two very different styles of bootleg people. There's the guys that are taking parts and making characters in their own world, and like creating new things. And then there's guys who are making toys from things that never had toys.
Yep.
Like the 2-bit hack has the Spaceballs figures, or the crap, I can't remember the name. The Blazing Saddles figures. It's like things that never had a toy line. And then there's the guys like Sucklord who are making, a character out of it, or like the Star Killer from Killer Bootlegs? Like he's taking these other toys, mashing them up, and creating a whole new character out of it.
Yeah. It's intriguing. It's a good point, because there's that piece, George, and then there's also, I think it was intriguing for me to learn about the quality differences and how, some are thinking about making it really pristine and high quality. Some really want detailed articulation, and some just want to mash up the thing. And if the quality is it's it was intriguing to me to hear the variety on that side as well.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely guys like, I'm sure, Teresa, you've never seen or held a David Healy toy in your hand. But if you ever get to see one or hold one, you'll see that they're pristine. And they talk about it in there, but it's even more than that when you look at it in person. Like his paint lines are crisp. Everything is perfect. The figure itself is just like this amazing work of art that you're just like, man, how do you sell that for $80 or whatever it is? Like, it must've been hours of, I don't know if you ever painted a toy, but getting a nice straight line and clean, perfect paint, especially in like a yellow, it's hard to do. And he really puts the time in and makes these things like, there's no air bubbles, there's no imperfections in the toy. You don't have a seam line from where you molded it. It's like he goes in and makes sure that it's a perfect piece. And then there's a guy like Sucklord, who his whole thing was about kind of like the lower end, like he's kind of just getting the idea out and some of that. And some of the stuff, there's not a lot, there's some of it where he doesn't do that, where he'll he'll say he is, but it's still a higher quality than he's saying it is. But yeah, there's a whole different variety of people out there, and it's almost could be a different skill level too, like, or how much time you want to put into this thing. Whereas Sucklord's just trying to get the whole idea out, where Healy's trying to create this like art piece.
Yeah. No, the stuff you've done. So like the sculpts you've done for DKE, the Scott
C.
Scott C. Is that in this realm? Is it a bootleg?
I guess technically it fits in what they're called bootlegs, but like there are 100% original sculpts, so it's not like. But the idea that you're stealing is not, you're still bootlegging because you're taking someone else's idea, I guess.
See,
it's tough. Like it's where do you draw the line and all this stuff?
Right. That's where I struggled, because when I was watching Master Casters, I'm trying to formulate an idea of what this is, because I think we talked about bootlegs, I don't know, a season or two ago. And again, my head was in the mindset of like straight up copy, try to sell it as its own bootleg. But like my definition of that and understanding that has evolved and changed and grown, because it's not just that bucket. And so when I'm watching this, like trying to learn more about it, like, do those that call themselves bootleggers or fit into the bootleg scene, do they all share a commonality of building off an existing action figure piece? So meaning they go, like, they're literally going and buying mass-produced stuff from a Target, right? And then taking the pieces apart and casting a hand from this and a leg from this and a helmet from this, and resin casting, and that is true to the bootleg, and everyone else is more just branches around the periphery? Or is it broader than that?
It's strange because everybody does it a little differently, and everybody, it depends on the amount of talent you have behind it. Like some of these guys don't sculpt, but they can mash up a figure, mash up a bunch of figures together, and the end result is amazing. And some of them sculpt the whole thing from scratch. So it just depends on, whatever gets you to the end result you're looking to get to, I guess. That's why it's really kind of hard to define what this stuff is. It's just called bootlegs because no one really has a better name for it.
Yeah. So there are some people who you're saying sculpt from scratch, even though they may say, I want to sculpt this torso to look like the torso of this figure. They may not be just doing a direct cast. They're redoing it on their own.
I would imagine they'd probably just, if they're looking for a specific torso, they'd probably just use it. But then that doesn't mean they don't alter it in some way. Like they could maybe sand down a piece of armor and sculpt a new piece of armor on top, or something like that, or add a belt that wasn't there, or things like that. So it's kind of hard because it's so varied in the different styles that unless like the nice thing about Sucklord's pieces, or a lot of the earlier stuff, was if you knew the references he was pulling from in that toy box of his that he got from since he was a kid, that you can find out like, oh, this is the arms of this thing. I remember that from and this is the legs of this thing, where he wasn't really creating new sculpts on it. He was like mashing up a bunch of old things. But I don't know if he still does just that, or if there's sculpting involved now, or it's hard to say.
Now, when Timothy was on, I kind of proposed the question of, would this resin bootleg scene be where it is today without Sucklord? But there's also Dove Kellemer. He was the one that was on the documentary, and he runs DKE Toys. And as an outsider, I personally feel like DKE Toys is sort of like the backbone of the resin bootleg scene. I mean, Dove was the one that kind of gave Sucklord his first opportunity and gave him his leg up, and really supported Sucklord throughout all of these years. And he's also done that by having that amazing booth presence at these toy conventions, San Diego Comic-Con, Designer Con. He showcases so many bootlegs at these events. So I also wonder, if DKE Toys didn't exist, would the bootleg scene be what it is today?
They definitely are the biggest pusher of it, and helping get people, or the highest profile pusher of it. They're getting people's names out there who might not have that big a following online. Like, so, if you're just a guy with a couple hundred friends on Instagram and you get your toy sold through DKE, now you're going to have a lot more people viewing it than before, So it's not, and and I think even Dove would tell you, like, you don't need him to sell your thing. But, to me, I think it's nice to have a guy who's like the go-to point man for like helping build the brand. He just loves that stuff so much that he's willing to spend his money on a booth to sell other people's things.
Yeah. But would you all equate, because in my mind, to me, based on that definition, what DKE is for bootleg artists, it almost sounds similar to what Marsham Toys is for customizers, in the sense that when I think about Marsham Toys and the different custom shows they do and the people, like, they do these massive, massive shows. And what I feel like the common theme I see with them is they're always bringing in new artists. It's not the same, top names you kind of hear and see throughout. You're always seeing newbies brought in and them trying to help bring new names to light. And it kind of feels like DKE is doing that for the bootleg side.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, they help establish artists that don't have established fan bases yet. And I think they kind of help introduce them to other avenues, right? I think if you're not established, if you don't have the fan base, you can't just go to a Super Plastic or a Medicom or whatever and just say, hey, make my toy. It doesn't work that way. And I think that's why Marsham Toys and DKE, they're great for giving these newcomers a leg up. Give them a chance.
Yeah, it's like a leg up.
I was going to say, I think there's definitely guys who sell through DKE who don't need to. Like, because most of these things, they're made in very small numbers. Like, if a guy's making 10 or 20 or something, you don't need to go to DKE to sell that. Like, you could probably find 20 people that that'll want to buy your thing. But it's nice to have that name brand recognition of getting it sold through DKE. Like, it has that clout behind it now.
Totally agree.
Yeah. Now, okay, one more quick question for my noob self. We keep saying like resin. Is every bootleg resin cast, or are there some people who literally take the original pieces and just mix and match them and sell that directly? Does that make sense?
I think it's cool. There's a guy, I wish I knew I don't know. I'm terrible with names. I've always been on all the podcasts I've been on. There's a guy who makes these things, and he more makes one-offs. So, like, he might not necessarily even need to mold something. He could just find a bunch of stuff, mash it up, and repaint it. But he's more making, like, hey, I like Mega Man, so I'm going to make this, like, Mega Man figure. And he makes, like, a nice little package for it, and it makes a one-off. It's still technically the bootleg scene. Like, it's still that same thing, but he's not making a run of them.
Yeah.
With a lot of the resin stuff, if you're doing resin stuff, it's usually because you're going to do a run of something.
Yeah, make multiples. Okay, I'm just curious. It's just a whole world that it's new to me. It's intriguing. And it makes me want more. It's like, we've seen a bite of the bootleg. Now I'm like, I'd like to see like a kaiju one or a Sofubi one, or shoot, I want to do one like all about cute. Like, I don't know, it'd be interesting to explore all the different pockets, especially the ones that, like, I feel like I'm constantly learning and growing and understanding more and more, but I don't know what I don't know. And I'm curious what else is out there that I've glazed over or glanced over because I just don't get it or understand it, or it doesn't appeal to my aesthetic. So I just have never delved deeper into it. It's just
it'll definitely change your decon walking around this year now, because you'll have a little peek of these designer bootlegs, and you'll have to go look at them now.
Yeah, because there's definitely booths, right? You're walking by and you're like, I don't know what that is. Like, that's not me. But now it's like, like, what is this? What is this categorized?
Latresa, less talk, more action. Do it. Make that cute documentary.
You want me to make some documentaries, Gary?
I do. I don't think you're busy enough. I think you need more on your plate. I think you should go buy a camera, take a trip to Ohio, take a trip to Japan, make that film.
Oh my God. Every time before like a 5 points or decon, in my head, I have plans. I'm like, I'm going to do this or film this or blah, blah, blah. And it just never happens. But maybe somehow, some way, I can have a passion project, and 10 years from now, you'll see it.
Oh, I don't have 10 years to wait, though. That's the problem. Why don't you do, you've been doing that thing on the Toy Chronicle where you can upload your own articles and stuff there. Why don't you do that? Why don't you start start like a monthly article called like the cute side of things or cute corner with Teresa, or we haven't been using the That's So Teresa thing anymore. Do you like That's So Teresa by Teresa Hawkins?
That would be kind of fun. Okay. I will noodle that. Find time amongst all the crazy, but yeah. Do you all want to answer the whole bootleg versus indie question? Do you feel like, for me, I was gonna say the whole analogy, like all thumbs are fingers, but not all fingers are thumbs. So all bootleg toys are indie, but not all indie toys are bootleg.
All fingers are what?
All thumbs are fingers, but not all fingers are thumbs. You not heard these analogies?
I have. I've heard the Muppet version of that. I've never heard that thumbs and fingers one.
But that's the way I think about it. At the end of the day, is I would classify a bootleg in some way as an indie toy, but indie toys is a broader term. To me, indie is kind of synonymous with designer toy or art toy in my head.
Yeah, no, I hear ya. I don't think I get that deep with this stuff. I don't necessarily like the labels of things. I can look at things for the most part and go, okay, that's a designer toy, that's an art object, whatever. It's independently produced by that artist, or even small run productions by companies. That's all. I still consider that independently, like designer toys. I just look at things as designer toys and mainstream toys. Bootlegs as bootlegs. I don't like too many labels confuses things. I like to keep it simple. Stop with the hoity-toity.
It's a struggle because I'm looking to my right now. I'm sitting at my desk and staring at this pile of toys, and I could see how someone would say like that's more of an art toy than this. But like again, I don't care. Like I like them.
Exactly. Just buy it because it brings you joy. Like it doesn't matter. You know what? People outside the designer toy scene don't know if that's a mainstream toy or a designer toy or an art toy or a bootleg or a indie toy. They just see all of our stuff the same. They just see, oh, you collect toys. So that's it. It's just like collect what you want. Toys, art toys, whatever. But for the sake of this podcast, we have to talk strictly designer toys because the mainstream toy world is huge. The Mattels and the Hasbros and all that stuff. We can't focus on that area.
Sometimes I focus on them.
George, you definitely dabble more in the mainstream. We've all seen Toy Break and Behind the Counter.
Well, we all kind of do.
Of course, sure.
As collectors, we can't help but sometimes cross over. I mean, I know you'll get more into mass market probably than either of us, but I mean, I'll catch on to Hatchimals or Cutie Cars or like something that's more mass because it appeals to me. It's the collector in you. So.
Yeah, I wouldn't say and that's the question of am I a collector? I don't necessarily collect any one thing, any one artist, any one brand. I just buy the things that I like. But yeah, occasionally I walk into a Target or a Walmart or even a Walgreens all the time. I'm like, that's cool. I'm going to pick that up. I just did that recently. Something I picked up, probably like 2 weeks ago. It's a soft and slow squishy, and it's called Designers with a Z. But it's just rad little Yeti guy with an amazing textile print on it. But yeah, it's mass produced, but it's awesome.
You know, my current obsession outside of designer toys is have you ever heard of Squishmallows? I can't remember if I've mentioned them before.
Yeah, that's the plush you mentioned a long time ago, right?
I think back when we talked Toy Fair, maybe a couple years ago, I mentioned them as kind of a side note. These things, I'm telling you, are blowing up. I think it's more of a younger kid kind of thing. I'm a young kid at heart. I don't care. But these are seriously the softest pillows ever. And they are just whipping them out. Here, and they're doing like the Funko model, right, where there's a million store exclusives and a variety of sizes and colorways. And it's like, it's simplistic, right? It's, cows and hedgehogs and dinos and whatever. But he's got that simple, stupid, cute, smiley face I love. And they are seriously the softest things ever. And I'll have to send you all a picture. It's bad. Like I went to Walgreens the other day to buy eye drops and I came home with a freaking giant dino squishmallow.
I'm pretty certain you would buy anything with that simple, cute, kawaii face. Like, if it was paint thinner, you would buy it because of that face was on it.
It's a hook for me. It's like people reel me in and I see it. And if it's done right, it's like, gosh darn it. I'm trying to get better. Like we said, I'm trying to be better this year and kind of take a chill pill and like analyze what I got going on first, but I still can't help it. And I was like, that is flipping adorable. I have a Triceratops. It was like a different version dino, different color. And I was like, they can be friends and they're massive, like huge pillows. So that's my sort of divert. George, go ahead. What have you been buying mass market since we're talking about it?
Wait, what were yours called again?
Squishmallows. Seriously, like your kids, Gary, would probably love them.
Oh, I know they do because we own some. I picked up some at probably Walgreens. I know we picked up some at Costco one year.
Oh, I didn't know you had any Squishmallows.
But we have so many plushes now that we bought a beanbag shell and we stuff all of like the Squishmallows and all the other plushes we have. And now they're just giant beanbags in the house.
Oh my gosh! That's actually a kind of interesting idea because I'm starting to accrue a little too much plush, and I was thinking about getting those like mesh sort of hammocks people will put in the corner of a room, and then like we'll put the plush. I've been thinking about getting one of those to stick in a corner of one of my rooms so I can display some of the plush like that versus having them scattered on beds and couches and stuff. But the beanbag thing's interesting.
Man, we didn't last 2 minutes without talking about mainstream toys after I mentioned that we focus on designer toys.
We went on a little tangent. George, do you want to talk about anything mass market you're addicted to since we're talking about that?
Here we go.
No. I think I already did.
Troy must be looking at the clock. He knows we're almost on an hour. Let's wrap it up.
Yeah, I feel like we're hitting our hour mark, are we not?
Well, you know what we didn't never look back. You hinted at this other kind of documentary around toys that's on YouTube, and I didn't know if we wanted to dig into that more. But when we were talking about Mastercasters, which one of you discovered was it Toy Masters series by Sci-Fi?
Yeah, that's it. I discovered that actually from Mastercasters. It left me wanting more, so I went on YouTube and started searching resin bootlegs, and I came across this cool little toy show on YouTube. It was called Toy Masters, and it was it's like a cool little, I think it's a 10-minute series. I think there's maybe 5 episodes in total. And one of the episodes was on resin bootlegs. It was very informative. They kind of did a countdown of some of their favorites, but it did dive into the toy scene a little bit and introduce some people that I had never heard of before. So that was a cool watch. And then other little episodes about like top 10 toys during the holiday season or top scariest toys seen in this toy store, and it's really well done. It was hosted by a guy named Tom Neff, and if anyone's looking for just a fun little show to watch on YouTube, I highly suggest checking it out. It's comical and well produced.
Yeah. The thing that was most interesting, I watched them back to back. I watched Mastercasters and then the Sci-Fi version, and the thing that was most intriguing to me was, other than the Suckler, completely different people were discussed, which was so intriguing to me. Just it seems like, one person's interpretation of who's big or who's worthy, like who they want to highlight in the bootleg scene, could be very different from someone else. And it seemed like the Sci-Fi one, the guy was focused on what he was personally interested in, like what was attractive to him. And so it was just intriguing to hear completely different names mentioned and what side of the scene he was interested in. Like he really liked the parody stuff, or people finding like really small, obscure things to highlight. So that was for me it was interesting to see.
Yeah, and it definitely seemed like he was showcasing more of the guys that do the, like, this thing never had a toy, I want to make a toy of it, instead of the people who are being, like, I don't want to say more creative, but just coming up with a different world of their own with it.
Right. I almost even bothered watching that Toy Master series because of the descriptions. On YouTube, they're like, made it seem like they were just a top 10 list, and I don't want to watch that, but I don't know why. I still gave it a chance, and it turned out they were really fun, and actually quite informative. So I'm glad that, and I wouldn't have discovered it if it wasn't for Master Cashers. So, but you know what? One bootleg I did see was it was the Wilford Brimley diabetes one. That's great.
Yes, diabetes. He's the best.
It was awesome. Though that's the bootleg that I gravitate towards. Those ones that just kind of clever, well done, and just I guess it's probably just somehow attaches to my past too.
Well, like South Park said, those are all the member berries. Those are like, hey, remember this?
Mm-hmm.
That's all. Like that's how they sell. Like, do you remember this?
Yeah.
That's it. That's all it takes to understand that toy. There's nothing else. There's no deeper level than, hey, do you remember this?
That's true.
I don't know. To me, that's not as appealing. I like the guys that are making up stuff with it. But, I mean, there's, of course, you know, when you remember it and you remember it fondly, you're going to like it. Like, hey, remember this? Okay, buy it.
It is an interesting sort of split between those two sides of things. I think I'm kind of side probably more with Gary, that I'm probably more attracted to oh, that's that thing from that show or commercial or thing.
Well, yeah, because it's easy to latch on to something that a mega company has already spent tens of millions of dollars to make you like. You know, it's harder to get you to like Star Killer that you've never heard of or seen before, and this is your first time ever looking at it, where right next to it is Darth Vader, and you're like, oh yeah, I know that. I grew up on that. So those are the things that, to me, those are low hanging fruit. It's just like it's just the thing it's easy. And sure, you know, there's a guy, you know, had to come up with it and put the talent in just to make the thing. And I don't know, I guess it's just as talented. But to me, that's the low hanging fruit of the scene.
I get it. It's built off of something that already exists versus creating something new, building off of other pieces to create essentially a new product at the end.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I bought plenty of them. I buy both kinds. But it's definitely an easier sell, I would imagine, if you're creating something. If you're creating stuff, sorry about the noise.
Did Jess throw like some meat on a pan?
Yeah, she just started to cook stuff in the background that started sizzling real bad.
I heard. I was like,
kind of lost my train of thought on that one.
I'm sorry.
All right, let's wrap this episode up. We're at an hour.
Well, hold on. Was there anything else? Because last week we didn't touch on the coronavirus at all, the impact on the toy industry.
I'll tell you, that coronavirus thing is really screwing up timelines this year. Like, you know, we're just kind of seeing the beginning of it. Depending on how long it lasts, it could be pretty harmful for the economy, for the toy industry. It's definitely the original Chinese New Year was supposed to end on the 3rd, and the workers were going to go back to work on the 3rd, and then the government mandated the shutdown last until the 10th.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're obviously past the 10th now, and it still hasn't come back yet. They've been, they're, you know, kind of ordered to take it slow, and as they see what happens with this whole thing. So they're expecting maybe the 18th, and then that's maybe at the earliest. So we're not even to the point yet where we know when they're going to start back up. And it's not just toys. I mean, all the car manufacturers in China, all the medical, you know, supplies, not only supplies, but some of the medicines themselves, like everything is made in China now. Like,
it's crazy.
It's gonna be tough to see what happens with all this. I think that a lot of the medical plants have been told to go back to work already, but obviously the ancillary stuff like a toy factory, they're, you know, keeping them, rightly so, keeping the workers safe by telling them to just stay home right now.
Yeah, it's great that they're thinking about safety, but at the same time, it's also nuts to think that these factories have been shut down a total of a month so far. That, you know, the impact is definitely going to be seen and felt.
Yeah, I would guess that there's probably going to be a lot of San Diego Comic-Con exclusives that may not make it this year.
Mm-hmm.
Unless those people were planning well ahead, and it's, you know, and they're going to be able to squeeze it in, you know, beforehand. It could, I mean, and we don't even know what's going to happen with shipping. Like, what happens if it's done and it's ready to ship out of China? Does it have to be quarantined for a certain amount of time? Is there going to be what's going to happen to all that product? Is it who's going to ship it here? I mean, I know that there's some airlines that aren't even flying to or from China right now.
Holy shit!
Sorry, it's the cats. They're wild.
Oh, okay. I
No, it was
was like, I
Jessica.
hope Jess
Not
is
that She don't
okay.
have pen.
My
Babe, go
purse,
sit down.
my purse literally fell, like, on top of it. Like, everything just fell out of my purse.
What were we talking about? Go
I'm
sit
outta
down.
here.
We're almost done.
You were talking about flights not going in and out.
Oh yeah, so like we don't even know like what's going to happen because there's I'm sure you guys have heard about that Japanese cruise line where
Yep.
they're
Yes.
all they have to be 14 days clear without someone getting coronavirus before they can let everybody off.
Yep.
But that gestation period, if someone gets sick, then there's another 14 days. They got to start over again. So who knows what happens with like, is this product going to have to be quarantined for 14 days when it comes in? Like,
Wow.
I don't know. We don't know the effects of what's going to happen with this stuff.
Yeah, and you mentioned San Diego, but I know Toy Fair is coming up.
It's this
Toy Fair.
weekend.
Yeah, and I Clem as an example, Big Shot Toy Works, and I've seen a few posts by him of like, I'm trying to figure out a way to like backdoor my stuff from China in time. Like, so it's not just it's big companies, but also people in our scene as well being affected by what's happening over there.
What you might not realize when, like what Gary was saying, when the factory shut down for that 2-week period, all those workers go home. So they, they're working at the factories and they basically live at the factory for that. Like there's dormitories and all that the factories have. So you're basically kind of living away from your family for months on end. At Chinese New Year, they all leave. So they go home back to their rural towns and farms and where all their families are. So that one day when they're supposed to come back, everybody's on like those trains are overloaded. All the transit systems. Imagine like you're with the crowd of millions. Like everybody's going back from their farm to the work. So imagine if they come back early because they want to open their factory to make your toy, and one guy comes in with the coronavirus and gets a trainload of people. Like it could be devastating. Like if it's something they can't control and people are actually dying from this thing, you definitely have to be cautious. And you can't, if one guy in a factory gets it, everyone's going to get it. I'm sure it's just like that cruise ship where it's just that recycled air going through, to everybody.
Yeah, it's scary. Business aside, I've heard it's hard being over here to kind of get a feel for, how bad it is, but hearing stories about what's going on and people, like all the masks are selling out. So from a collector standpoint, I have seen posts in groups of people posting up photos of toys they want to sell, and they want to sell them in exchange for masks because they cannot find face masks anywhere to protect themselves. So they're attempting to trade toys for them.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I don't even know if it's going to be a weird time right now, just kind of figuring out this whole system. And who knows, by the time this goes up, maybe they figure it out and it starts again. We don't know. We just don't know what it's going to happen.
Yeah, it's just kind of a wait and see scenario. It's definitely going to throw off some timelines, and companies are just going to have to adjust. It's unfortunate, and I'm sure we're probably going to see. We might not see it, but I'm sure there's some companies going to New York Toy Fair this weekend that we're probably waiting for some last minute samples or prototypes to arrive.
Yeah.
It's funny because like a lot of that prototyping that all used to be done here, now with the advent of the digital sculpting and the 3D printing, a lot of those companies go and get their stuff 3D printed overseas. And it's just funny because like if they would have just been doing it the old fashioned way, everything would be fine. All your prototypes would be here and cast here and made here, but everyone's trying to save a buck, so they go to China. So.
But speaking of Toy Fair, I'll have to keep my eyes peeled. Every year I'm always curious to see what gets revealed and what's coming out throughout the year. So
yeah, it's always fun seeing Toy Fair stuff. But anyways, we need to wrap this up because we are now the Marsham hour and 8 minutes. So let's end it here. Why don't each of you take a brief moment and let our listeners know where they can find you? Teresa, go first.
Sure. Teresa Hawkins. Find me on Instagram, tmhawk24.
You can find me at Double G Toys on Instagram, and don't forget about Timothy Patrick, who is at Mastercasters, I think, right? And then you can also find him at Indie Film Grit.
Okay, I'm Gary Ham. You can find me at Gary Ham on Instagram or superham.com. This has been the Marsham Toy Hour. We do this every week, not because we have to.
Because we want to.
So until our next transmission, we're signing off. Bye.
Bye. We did it!
Did it.
You should make that pause like extra long. The pause that always comes before someone else answers.
George, I paused because I never know if you're going to do it with me.
It's you. I'm always waiting for you. I'm not going to do it. It's you 100%. You always go next. You always go second in name, and you always say the thing at the end.
It's George.
No
You're
need to
allowed to
wait.
go second or talk.
Ladies first.
Next episode, you say your name first and you finish the ending.